All right, I'm going to welcome everybody here. We'll go ahead and get started. But this is the College of Education Research Colloquium. Glad to have you here. This is the second one that we've done this semester with local folks, and so I'm pleased to have everybody here. Today's presenters, Aman Yadav from the Department of Educational Studies, who's going to be talking about differences between affective and cognitive processing of video and case studies in science. And Susan Rich will be talking about visual communication and understanding multimodal discourse. And so each of them are going to take about a half an hour. We'll have time for questions, and then we've got another half hour sort of built into the whole session, so we've got some time for interaction if you'd like to ask questions. So I'll turn it over to Aman.
So I was talking to a colleague the other day about my research and why I got interested in video. I said it's because my father didn't allow us to have a color TV till I was a senior in college. So that was 99. So about 12 years ago, we didn't have a color TV in our house. So I'm like, I had to do something where, related with audio and video. And now my basement is, whole wall is my TV. Jokes apart, but today I'm going to talk about, the differences between affective and cognitive processes when you look at video and text cases in science. So I added a flair to the title: if picture is worth 1,000 words, is video worth 1,000,000? Right. So, but before I begin, so briefly, where does this project situate in my research area? My research has 4 different strands, but broadly I'm interested in problem-based learning in STEM, looking through case studies. So I work with engineering and science faculty on incorporating case studies in PBL in their courses. Another strand of research I have is professional development of pre-service and in-service teachers through the use of video cases. And within that context, I've designed video case-based learning environments in mathematics and literacy. And within that, this is where today's project falls, is the role of media in the design of cases. Everybody says that video is better because, but we don't know that, right? In terms of recall or cognitive processes or engagement of students. So that's what led me to look at this study. The debate whether media affects learning started with Clark, who published an article in 1983. He said, medium does not influence learning the same way delivery truck does not influence the nutrition you get in a food, right? So then Cosma wrote a rebuttal piece that media, because of its different attributes, does influence learning, right? And this was purely a theoretical argument, right? There's no empirical basis for their back and forth. What I found is that media benefits are not as simple to identify as it seems, that if I give students a video, they'll learn better, or if I give them the text, they'll learn better. And I'll talk about that throughout my talk today. The framework for this project is based on the dual coding theory proposed by Paivo in 1990. He proposed that there are 2 separate symbolic systems. One he called the Logan system, is attuned to the verbal information. That includes auditory processes and languages. The other system is the non-verbal system called imaging system. That includes imagery and visual and spatial processing. So he argued that if you present information that is in, say, in a multimedia form, there's little competition for resources because you're using both the imaging as well as the Logan system. Right? You're looking at your verbal information through the audio and your visual information through the video or images. Based on the dual coding theory, Sweller and Chandler proposed a cognitive theory of multimedia, and they argue the same thing, that it's easier to process information through multimedia because of having information being delivered through 2 separate symbolic systems, verbal and visual systems. And people have found that visual imagery such as pictures and video elicit more affective responses as compared to written words. So however, so we did another study where we found that it's a complex interaction. So not every video or picked image or visual system that students see is going to generate higher emotional engagement. It depends on the content. So if you give students a human interest story, that's going to engage them more as opposed to seeing a video of a lecture, right? Because the content that's being delivered is separate. So in another study by Edens and McCormick, they found that visually based ads evoke stronger emotional responses than do print-based ads, because pictures have more direct access to the affect mediating those imaging system. However, video is only, as I said earlier, is only beneficial for certain types of stories. Right? So again, in this story, we found that it's content dependent. Right? So every video is not going to work for everybody. In terms of, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me as I'm going along, especially when we get to the methodology. Mixed results. There are mixed results in terms of cognitive processing of media. So some studies have found that if you look at recall, video influences recall. Whereas other stories have found that it doesn't matter if students read from video or text, it's the same recall, especially immediate recall. So Baggett did a study in 1979 where she created two equivalent versions of the same story, a video version and a text version. And she found that there was no effect for media in terms of recall if you looked for immediate recall. But if she did a follow-up recall after 7 days, which revealed that there was a much better performance for participants who had viewed the story in the video form as opposed to just the text form. Chu and Lee did another study in computer science where they looked at whether video was beneficial for students. So they had three groups. They had a video group, whose students learned about computer science concepts through video. Lab, so they actually went to the lab, or video plus lab. So they got the video as well as the lab. And they found that video was, by itself, was not beneficial in terms of learning outcomes. It was beneficial if students had access to the video before the lab they came, or even afterwards. So because they could go back and refer to that. So if you think about in terms of teacher preparation, video might be a powerful tool if we allow teachers to observe teaching practices, right? But if they just saw the video without the context of the classroom, it might not be as beneficial.
In that last study, were they able to control the time on task?
No, it didn't. Yeah. So of course that's a variable as well. In the current study, we were interested in students' cognitive processes, so the type of strategies they use, as well as the impact on their affective realm, so emotional engagement with the materials. So the three questions were, does the media or case affect students' cognitive processing strategies? Does the media or case is the story, affect students' emotional reaction? Or do either media or case affect students' 6-week recall? So we did a recall 6 weeks after the students had experienced the video or the text case. So there were 30 education majors that participated in this study, 7 males, 23 females. Majority of them were freshmen and Caucasian, and the average age was 19 years. So typical of what undergraduate education population is. For the videos we chose, or the text, we chose 3 stories of very diverse individuals. So Lisa is a Caucasian heterosexual female from an affluent background. We had Doug, who was homosexual male from a middle class background. And Catrice, she was an African American woman from a low SES. And they were all HIV/AIDS cases. They were used in a biology course. The cases provided a context for DNA sequence manipulation. Right? So they were using a software called KSET. So there were 3 different media versions created. A text version, which was basically verbatim of the video transcript. with a few things added in. A video version and a video plus text version. So they were juxtaposed together. So as an example, so here's an example of what they look like. So that's the text version, and they were segmented into 2 parts. So they had to click continue to go into the second part of the case. Same for the video and the video plus text. That gives you an idea of how it was structured. All participants experienced the 3 cases, but they were counterbalanced for media and case conditions. So what that means is, for example, if I'm a first participant, I would get Lisa video, Doug text, Catrice video plus text. Second participant, gets Lisa video, Catrice text, or video and Doug video plus text. That'll make, so it's a counterbalancing for content as well as the condition that they were in. So for each participant, it was equally likely that they experienced all 3 cases, but in different order. Is that clear? Okay. Participants then completed a background survey about their, demographic information. Then we had a training session to model Think Aloud. So they used a sample video, which was not the video included in the study, and we showed them how they could think aloud, how they could pause the video if they had a thought to share, and for the text one, how they could knock on the desk if they had a thought to share with the researcher. And all of their think alouds were videotaped as well as audio taped. Then after each case, participants completed a 23-item engagement questionnaire. So that included things like the story made me feel excited, bored, emotional, unemotional, the cases were interesting, or not interesting, realistic, unrealistic. And then we had a 6-week recall where participants came back and they were asked, what they remembered about the case, what stood out for them. So it was an open-ended recall.
Sorry, I don't know if you missed it, but on the think aloud portion, what were they actually thinking aloud about?
So they could share their thoughts about the particular case, and I'll get to that in a second here. So I'll give you examples of kind of things that they shared. So all their think alouds were transcribed and coded, but we only selected 15 participants randomly from the pool of 30 participants, because coding 30 is much more intense than 15. So we randomly selected 15, making sure that we balance the case and the media combinations. And we developed a coding scheme which consisted of 6 categories based on their think alouds: cognitive processing, judgment. So let me jump ahead one slide. So cognitive processing included things like prediction, summary, inference, and monitoring. So if they said, for prediction, when it said that this would be the last place that you would expect to find it, I knew she was probably going to have AIDS. So they're predicting ahead, right? Judgments were judgments about the participant, right, or the society. So they talked about, condoms, but just didn't use them. That was really stupid. The positive evaluation, about the story. And these were 3 very distinct cases. So Lisa was HIV positive, but she got married and had kids. And after she found out she was HIV positive, but because her dad was very affluent and a doctor, she didn't have any, long-term consequences, and she was able to get married, and kids were HIV negative. We had Doug, who was homosexual, and so students brought their own biases towards that. And then we had Catrice, who was from a low SES, African American, didn't have a lot of knowledge, dropped out of college, high school, and so they had their own negative judgments towards that. All the positive evaluations were mainly for Lisa, right? Because she has such a successful life. Then we also have cognitive disconnect. So if they disagreed with something, or if they couldn't fit in with their existing, schema, how they thought of the topic at hand, and also their prior knowledge. Were they able to make connection to the world, or to the self, their personal beliefs, and also emotion. They felt bad for her and things like that. Since the videos were segmented, if I go back, So they had to continue to click on the next part of the story. It ideally provided a good point for them to share their thoughts about the first part of the case, right? So sometimes not all of them actually stopped and shared their thoughts. They would share their thoughts when they were in the middle, at this natural breaking point of the story. So based on this coding scheme, once we had the coding scheme developed, 2 researchers separately coded all the 15 transcripts, and they agreed on their inter-rater reliability was 79%. And any disagreements were resolved by consensus. And then we did a multivariate analysis for the 6 categories with 2 factors, media and the case type. So 3 cases and 3 media conditions. For the survey, we did exploratory factor analysis, and which resulted in 7 different factors. So engagement, positive affect, sympathy, was it thought-provoking, knowledgeable, realistic, and bias. There was only 1 item in bias actually, and the resulting 7 factors were analyzed in a ANOVA. But since we were running 7 different ANOVAs, we did a Bonferroni adjustment, and our p-value or alpha value was 0.05 divided by 7 was 0.0007, so that we were not increasing our type 1 error rate. The recall data was again transcribed and coded, and which resulted in 4 different categories. Recall about description of the individual, so white, male, homosexual, or black, from the South, or Lisa, daughter. Family of the individual, whether they could recall about the family of the individual, like Lisa, she had 3 kids, and so on and so forth. Contraction, how they contracted HIV, and medication. What types of medication were they taking? So they were categorized in 4 broad categories. And again, after this coding scheme was developed, 2 researchers coded them separately, and it just happens that they were like magic, was 79% reliability again. And then we did ANOVA for on all those 4, and again we did the Bonferroni adjustment and divided p-value by 4, which resulted 0.0125 was our alpha value that we looked at. So the results. Well, video and text have similar cognitive effects. So the media is not influencing their recall. It's not influencing their cognitive dissonance or cognitive processing, right? So it didn't make a difference on their cognitive processing. However, the case was significant. So the type of story was making influence on the types of thing they were able to recall, or they had types of positive evaluation or judgment that they had. So students had more, as I said earlier, had more positive evaluations for Lisa than Doug, who had more positive evaluations than Patrice, right? And they were also more likely to pass judgments on Patrice than Doug than Lisa. Again, the content matters. So the medium is not influencing their, cognitive processing at all. It's the case type is influencing that. And there was interaction effect between media and case. So the video for Catrice was much more powerful than, text for Catrice. In terms of the survey results, participants felt much more engaged in the video and video plus text condition. So we asked them, when you had both video and text, they said they never read the text. They just saw the video. Also, the case type was important for remember one of the factors in the survey was positive affect. So they had more positive affect towards Lisa and Doug's case as compared to Catrice. So that's similar to the think aloud analysis. The survey sort of corroborated our think aloud analysis that they had more positive affect towards Lisa. Recall suggested there are no differences for media in 4 categories. They were higher for video. They recalled more for video in each of the conditions, but it was not statistically significant. Right? So we can't say it's the video that caused higher recall. Case was significant for family of the individual and the type of medication they were taking. So Lisa, they were able to recall more about her family because she was such a unique case, because she was HIV positive, had HIV negative kids. So they were clearly able to recall more about her and medication for her too, because her dad was a doctor and she was getting the best care. And same for Doug too. He was relatively from middle class, was able to afford a medication, whereas Catrice had to go to a local health office to get medication, and so it was so there were two differences on the case, the type of thing they were able to recall. So what does it all mean? Video is more powerful in terms of on the affective and engagement realm, but in terms of cognitive processes, it doesn't make a difference, video or text. Right? They have similar effects, especially in the cognitive processing, the cognitive dissonance, and the recall of information. Content matters because stories clearly influence their participants' evaluation, judgment, and recall. So, somebody, I read an article that I think John Dewey wrote, and he cited this American humorist, and it's like, it makes no difference what you teach a boy so long as he doesn't like it. Right? So that's our takeaway from the study, that video at least engages them in the content. Again, in terms of the validity, this was a lab study and not done in the context of the classroom. So it'd be interesting to do it with the actual biology course and see what they assign one only text cases and one get video cases and see how that does. So the benefit of video cases is in engaging students in the content, making it interesting, especially in science teaching, where students typically say that they get bored. They don't see the relevance of the content they're learning. That's all I had.
Good.
Questions?
So what is your, this is great, what does your study contribute to the Cosmo-Clark argument then?
Sorry, what?
What does the study contribute to the Cosmo-Clark argument?
Well, they're clearly arguing that, or Clark is arguing that video doesn't matter, doesn't impact learning.
Design is the thing.
Design is the thing.
Right.
So his argument is that a delivery truck doesn't influence the nutrition, or like transportation doesn't influence nutrition. My counter argument to that is, it does, right? Because a delivery truck or planes, I can get any fruit from any part of the world, right? Anywhere, typically. Right? So, in terms of video, it depends, right? It depends on the content you're trying to deliver. It's not going to make an impact on everything that you consider, right? But if it engages students, right, that's the first step. And hopefully, in the context of a classroom, that'll lead to more learning gains if they're paying attention. So from an information processing model, the first thing that happens is, an information comes to the sensory registers that goes to short-term and long-term memory. It only goes to the long-term memory if you pay attention, right? If you don't pay attention, it's lost. So another example, you go to a party, right? And then everybody's talking with a lot of noise. Suddenly you hear your name, right? And then you turn your attention towards that, even though you're focused on one-on-one. The rest of the thing is it's just background noise until you hear your name. And that's an attention part, right? Because it's in a long-term memory, you can access it. So same goes for video. If you can engage the student, hopefully you have their attention, right? And that can lead to more learning.
So I really enjoyed this, and I apologize we have to leave in a minute. But I guess I'm curious about, you said in the cognitive side it doesn't make much of a difference, but you had increased recall. It seems to me like if you have increased recall, that is a cognitive improvement.
It was an increase in terms of just the means, but in terms of statistical analysis, it's not significant, right? So I can't, as a researcher, I can attribute that the video caused it.
Yeah.
If I would have seen a significant difference, then yes, I could say, yeah, video caused recall. But that's why I said, it did lead to a higher recall, but I can't attribute it to video. It could be some other factor.
Okay.
And that's the nature of the beast that we deal with, right? Research that's got to be statistically significant to attribute it to treatment.
So all participants experience the 3 different conditions, and I think there might be diffusion effect, and so that might affect the results.
Yeah, it might have, but I mean, and that's a debate we had beforehand. You know, do we give one participant each condition, or do we get separate participants, right? Then it would be hard for us, since we had 3 different cases, and we also wanted to see, does content matter or type of story matter? It would be hard for us to look at that interaction between the case and the story, right? So that's why we chose 3 different, cases and trying to look at, in a context.
So I'm just curious, would the participants' prior knowledge have influence on how they perceive or react to the video or?
Well, and so we wanted to look at their prior knowledge of HIV and AIDS, and we had some issues with IRB about whether you're getting into their personal, so we had to remove those questions from our pre-surveys. So ideally, I don't know, I can't answer that because we didn't have that. We didn't collect that.
My question is kind of similar to your question. I'm wondering, has there been any analysis been done that looks at the significance of the cases and the content of those cases to the nature of who the students are? Were there parallels between who these students were with the individuals in the cases so that they did identify with some of the elements of their lives? And I guess I'm not getting at the HIV/AIDS background experience, but just, could they identify with them?
I mean, right now, the background information we have is, and I just finishing up analysis right now, we all did collect one piece of information that is not included in this analysis is, we asked them a question of, like 3 or 4 questions about what they learned best with. I enjoy reading a book, or I enjoy watching a video rather than the book, or I enjoy watching Harry Potter movie rather than reading a book, or I'd rather read a book rather than a movie. So that's one thing that I still need to look at least in the context of their own preference for video versus text.
Okay.
Does that relate to their outcome? So that'd be a good thing. That's a good point. Okay.
Since I came late, I didn't know if you mentioned why you choose HIV case for experiment. I think the content itself is appealing to students. So could you say the reason why you choose?
Well, we were working with the biology professor, and he was debating between use video versus audio in the software, and that was going to be a long-term decision. So, and that's why we did it in the context of the class, and we said, well, we could do a study and see if it actually makes a difference. So after this, there were no differences on the cognitive processes. He decided to use video because at least it was more engaging to students.
So it's part of their learning, right?
Yes, so this is used in the class. These were used in the classroom.
Okay.
So if one of the things you want to look at is video versus text versus the combination on engagement and on processing, I'm sort of wondering why you chose to even use 3 different cases. I'm wondering if that doesn't really add a lot of potential confusion to, additional covariates that are thrown in there having to do with, people's response to somebody who's of a different race or of a different SES, and whether you, either before the study maybe, and you chose to then make a more complex design, maybe you looked at a single case study in those 3 media formats, and then compare just that. So then you're really just looking at media type. This is the first study, so we didn't have any prior, so we didn't look at them separately. And we had done the previous study in 2005 where we looked at different stories, right? So the human interest story, and then we had a guy reading a poetry, and then we had Marvin Minsky giving a lecture, right? So we had these 3 very different, and that showed that content mattered, right? So and we were trying to argue the same point. Story versus
The story,
just content.
just content, right?
Yeah.
So we were trying to see that at least in this case, the topic is the same.
Mm-hmm.
you know, but the stories are different.
Yeah.
Now, will that make a difference? You know, and in this case, clearly content, it was significant for multiple things. So that was the main factor that influenced their recall, at least on two things, and it influenced
It
their.
just seems it's very difficult to sort of tease out what's really the factor there, if it's mostly the media type that's engaging them, or the fact that, plus you had 3 different stories, 3 different media types.
Media types, yeah.
15 participants, right? So-
Yeah, 15 for the think aloud that we did, but yeah,
Right.
30 overall, yeah.
So 9 different combinations, once you divide that by 50, so you start losing some statistical power when you add in
Yeah,
3
yeah.
and 3, or multiplication.
So it would be interesting if we just take one story and see if we could just do it,
Yeah,
do it that
It'd be
way.
really interesting, you know,
Yeah.
especially, you know, you pick whichever one you want, but,
Yeah.
because then you get that kind of clear delineation.
Between, for the medium, at least, yeah.
I have one comment and one question. The comment is, it seems that in this study, you didn't use the learning materials which had like high interactivity elements. It seems that this is kind of like truth recall.
Yeah, this is a free recall, yeah. This is a free.
There was no significant difference between video and case, because you said like a student use the video, they feel more engaged, supposed to help their cognitive processing. And the question is that as for cognitive processing, what kind of learning outcomes did you measure, only recall?
We just looked at recall.
I see.
I think I'm out of time. One more question, maybe? Okay. Oh,
I'm just curious, sorry I'm late, I missed out on something that's very interesting to me. In the conclusion, it makes no difference what you teach your boy so long as he doesn't like it. I'm sure you've already commented on this before. Why don't they like it?
and no, this was, we were talking about how video versus text, video engaged students more than the text cases did. So at least video has that benefit of engaging students. So if they like it, hopefully, you know, they'll learn it.
Got it.
All right, thank you.